Have you ever been on a fishing charter? What about deep sea fishing, where you were way out there and you couldn't even see the land? There's only you, the crew, and your thoughts. Did you think that killing everybody was a good idea? Well, these guys did. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Stranger Than Fiction podcast. I'm your host, Rashad Freeman. Let's get to it. A Chinese deep sea squid fishing vessel arrives home 1 year early from what was supposed to be a 2-year fishing voyage over to South America. Family members and onlookers are standing at the pier as the enormous ocean liner slowly begins to dock. It's storming out. The people on the dock are being battered by the rain, and their flimsy umbrellas are no match for the wind. But they stand their ground. They're anxious. They're curious. Why is the boat back so soon? Did something go wrong? Is everyone okay? They have lots of questions, but they're also excited to see their loved ones. But the authorities are also waiting. Representatives from the company that owns the ship are out there, and over a dozen police cars. This is not normal. So for these big ocean liners, docking is not an easy process. It takes nearly 2 hours, but the ship finally docks. Anticipation is building as people wait for the crew to come out. Minutes tick by, they're waiting and waiting. Then one by one, the crew is escorted out wearing handcuffs, placed into separate patrol cars and whisked away. The families are not allowed to talk to them or even get close, and they are left at the docks scared and confused. Why can't the crew talk to their family? Why is no one telling them what's going on? And more importantly, why did only 11 people get off the ship when the crew had 33? Then suddenly guys in hazmat suits start heading onto the ship, along with forensics teams carrying luminol. This looks like an episode of CSI, but they quickly uncover that blood is splattered all around, and I mean all around this vessel. It was on the walls, on the floor, on the mattresses, splattered across the electronics. At some point, the ship had looked like a slaughterhouse, but somebody tried to clean it up. It's a perplexing situation until they start to piece together the stories told by the remaining crew. So let's start at the beginning. This ship was a squid fishing vessel, and apparently this industry is like the mafia on the water. The New Yorker actually did a documentary on the industry just by itself.
说能乘坐你们船，回到大陆的话，如果是我们想回家，可以提供更多的信息，说中国的大使馆、阿根廷的中国的大使馆，
因为我们的证件很多都被扣押了，他不给我们嘛。
比如说这上面有，
但是我的护照，可是我不知道怎么回去。
But he doesn't know how to go back.
他不让我下船。
But he would like to. And what was he saying?
你在说什么？对，就是说如果能乘坐你们船到中国的，就是阿根廷的大使馆，我可以提供更多的信息，因为这上面有很多东西不方便透露。因为说毕竟在这条船上工作，对，
强留我们在那里，然后我们是走不了，他也不给我们船走。就算打个比方，我们不是违约嘛，然后我有时候1分工钱我不要，他也不能让我。
These guys are out here in the middle of the ocean in the complete darkness, in the cold, just pulling up squid all night long. It's super dangerous, the conditions are terrible, and a lot of people die. So the ship in question, deep sea liner 2682, was getting ready to head out on a 2-year trek to hunt squid. They were leaving from the port in China, going over to Peru and Chile, around South America, then eventually passing by Japan through the South Pacific, and then heading back home to China. And this is pretty routine for these types of ships. They are built to go out to sea for very long periods of time. 2682 was a 40-meter squid trawler that would be going out for its 5th offshore operation. Now, before the ship ever even left the dock, weird things started to happen. They'd hired a chef for the ship. He'd be responsible for preparing the 3 meals a day for the next 2 years for the entire crew. Well, he went crazy. You see, all the crew was working around the clock to make preparations for the trip. You know, provisioning, bringing supplies on board, any last minute fixes. Because they were doing so much work at odd hours, they were all just sleeping on the boat at the dock. So So in the middle of the night, these blood-curdling screams erupt from one of the cabins. Someone is yelling, "Murder, murder, murder, murder," over and over. Everyone jumps up in a panic. People are rushing all over the ship. Then they realize it's the chef's cabin. They rush inside, and he's alone, just screaming by himself. They manage to calm him down, convinced that he's just had some kind of nightmare. So he lays back down, and everyone goes back to doing whatever they were doing. Then a couple hours later, he's at it again. "Murder, murder, murder, murder." This time, they drag the chef out of the bed like, "What is wrong with you? Control yourself." Nobody wants to be stuck on this boat for 2 years with a psycho. Now, up until then, everyone that knew the chef said he was a normal guy. He had worked on several of the boats at the docks before, a lot of the crew had worked with him before, and he was used to going out for long periods of time. He was a regular, but it is a stressful industry. They've been working around the clock to get things prepared, so maybe he's just overworked. He sits on the floor like he's collecting himself, then he suddenly jumps up, runs to the edge of the ship, and jumps into the murky water below. Now at this point, they are still at the docks, but lots of creatures tend to prowl the waters near the boats, especially at night. And these are massive ships that could completely crush him. So people are throwing life preservers to him, trying to get him out of the water. But he's swimming away from everyone as he continues to scream at the top of his lungs. It takes them 30 minutes just to get this guy out of the water. And then they send him home and replace him with another chef. Now, the events that take place on this boat, we only know of from the testimony of the survivors and a translated interview that one of them gave. But this is how the story goes. The crew for 2682 finished loading the boat. Now, the company that owns the boat provides sleeping arrangements and food for each of the crew, but that's about it. So each of the crew members has a weight limit on things they can bring on. And remember, they're gonna be gone for 2 years. So you need to bring whatever it is that you think you'll need for the next 2 years. Now, there is a general store on the ship, but they are charging outrageous prices for anything. I mean, think about it. If you're at the store, it's because you really need something and you have no other options, so they can charge you whatever they want. So people bring beer, cigarettes, whatever vice they think they're gonna need. But for one crewman, a guy named Lou, he saw a huge business opportunity. He took out a loan and bought as many cigarettes as he could. It's a fishing vessel and everyone on it smokes. But cigarettes in the general store were like 20 times more than they were on the mainland. Lou's plan? To sell them for half of that. So he's still making 10 times his money. So they set sail for Peru on December 27th, 2010. Remember this date because it will become very important later. Like many of the ships that work under these same conditions, the usual complaining and nagging is almost immediate. They work these guys long hours, and apparently a number of the crew had been smuggled on board to bypass customs inspections because they were essentially undocumented workers. So you have a mixed bag of people and everyone has a gripe. The complaining continues, but by February, they've made it to Peru and they begin what is called squid jigging. Now, the demand for squid worldwide is very high, with America being at the top of that. So they run these boats hard. There's a lot of turnover in the industry. So a lot of the guys on this ship, it's their first time at sea. And again, they are going out for 2 whole years. Now, there's a hierarchy on these ships. The top, of course, being the captain, but there are like regulars, and then there's like the crew that they pick up that nobody on the boat even knows. So you could be spending the next 2 years of your life isolated in the middle of the ocean with complete strangers. For 2682, there were 5 members that were management personnel, or that reported back to the operating company. The remaining crew members were whoever they picked up from all over the region. And out on the water, there's no authorities, no hospitals, no police, just the law of the boat. Something happens and you don't like it, you can't call anybody. For 2 years, you're on this boat, and the only thing that keeps the peace is a shaky agreement between fishermen and how well you can handle yourself. There's no, oh, I've had enough, I'm ready to go home, or I quit, or I don't feel like working today. You are at the mercy of the rules of the ship. And a lot of these ships, they don't play. They will beat crew members, starve them, even throw them off the ship. And what are you gonna do? You're out there in the middle of the ocean. So Sea Liner 2682 makes it to Peru, and the complaining and discontent continues to grow. Whispers are going around the boat about how they can't trust the operating company, how they're scamming them all, and how they reduce salaries. And there was some truth to that. Like while at sea, a few men fell ill and were unable to work. It was bad enough that they were requesting the company be called and send a fast boat to pick them up. The captain refused, but what he did do was call the company and stop their payments for the 3 to 4 weeks that they were unable to work. So the vibe was like, work as hard as you can, give us everything. Then if something happens to you, we don't care and we won't pay you. Now, the contract that the regular crew members had was something like the equivalent of $90,000 a year in the US. And for most of these guys, they were coming from poverty. And while this was a great risk, they did have the chance to make lots of money. And that's why they did it. So even the whispers of a rumor that the company may not honor that was pissing people off. So there's a growing faction on the boat that's starting to whip themselves into a frenzy over the shadiness of the company and how the captain is part of it all. And at the top of this gang of mistrust leading the rallying cry was Lou, the same guy that took out the loans on the cigarettes. Day by day, this faction is getting angrier and larger. They're like a bundle of super flammable firewood, and all they need is a spark and everything is going up in flames. And as they're nearing a refueling stop near Chile, something would happen that would pour lava onto this situation. One night, Lou and some of his gang and other crew members are eating, and one guy starts to say something, but then just stops. Everyone is like, what? He's like, oh, it's probably nothing, never mind. Well, now you've got to tell us. And the man goes, it's just, we were supposed to leave on the 28th, but we left a day early. And our contract is for the 28th. Everyone is like, so what? Well, you don't think they could void the contracts, do you? Since the dates are wrong? No one had ever thought about that. But with all the mistrust of the company and talks about them not paying people, this sent them into a frenzy. And by the next day, some of them, including Lou, go to talk to the captain. Now remember, their issue is about the dates of the contract, and that's what they go to speak to him about. The captain tells them their contracts are fine, but he clarifies that the $90,000 that they were supposed to get is only if they don't catch any squid. If they catch squid, then they get the base pay, which was less than a third of that plus commission. And the commission numbers required them to catch what was basically an impossible amount of squid, and they still wouldn't get the $90,000. And just now they're being told this, because now all of them have caught some amount of squid, some more than others, but they're all on the commission plan now. So that $90,000, it ain't happening. Lou starts to freak out because not only was he banking on getting the money in his contract, but remember, he had taken out a loan for all of the cigarettes. And now with the money that he was actually making, he wouldn't even be able to pay that loan back. Even worse, the loan that he took out was from the same company that was operating the boat. Like, imagine taking a job for $90,000 and learning you were only gonna make $25,000 instead. And after 2 years of hard labor, you owed your employer for cigarette loans. So now everyone on the ship is finding out that they are basically being scammed. And they all just stop caring. They aren't trying to fish anymore. There's really no incentive. And from there, this is where this ship descends into chaos. So there are basically 4 groups or 4 gangs on this boat. There's the captain's gang with the management team, Lou's gang, a Mongolian gang, and one gang that kind of just sat in the middle and hadn't really chosen a side. So Lou and the Mongolian gang leader get together. They start sharing their grievances and decide they should hijack the ship and sail back home. Both of their gangs are in, so then they go to try to convince the neutral gang. Lou tells them he's been tracking the coordinates of the ship, and even without the captain, he's sure he can sail them back home. He also has a plan to get with a lawyer when they return, and they can all sue the company together. The neutral group says they'll think about it. So Lou's group and the Mongolian group start gathering weapons, hiding knives, getting pipes, and the plan is, after the refueling stop, they're gonna take over the ship. Now, they're still a few weeks out from the stop, so life on the boat continues. And the plan seems to gain and lose support every other day. Sometimes they're all talking about it. Other times, it seems like they've changed their mind. But the captain is an abusive and angry man. I mean, he's dealing with the crew and no longer wants to fish, but it's his job to make sure they do. So he beats people and he threatens to throw them overboard with the sharks. And this is what starts bringing some of the undecided crew along with the plan. They stop for refueling on June 16th, and that night, the plan goes into action. Some of the group destroys the communication and positioning systems, while others break into the captain's room. They hold him at knife point and demand that he change course and take them back home. He refuses, then gets stabbed in his thigh and beaten. They mean business. They tie him to the chair and demand that he turn the ship around. And they tell him if he doesn't, they're gonna throw him overboard. The captain was like, okay. And he gives the order to pull up all fishing rigs and prepare the ship to head back home. The other people on the captain's little management gang are like, what is going on? They head to the captain's room, but Lou's men are standing guard with knives and pipes, and the management team wants none none of that. They're like, fine, if you want to turn the ship around, let's do it. But the chef grabs a kitchen knife that hadn't been confiscated and rushes to the captain's quarters. He bursts into the door screaming, "You think you're gonna hijack this ship?" and literally gets stabbed in the back. They knock him to the ground and stab him several more times and beat him with pipes, then throw him into the murky depths of the ocean while he's still kicking and screaming. And he becomes the first casualty on the boat. So that night, the entire crew, they're wide awake and terrified. They don't know what's gonna happen next because Lu's gang and the Mongolian gang have effectively taken over the ship. They're holding the captain hostage, and the rest of the management team are doing whatever they're told because they know they could be next. So they're sailing back to China, and for a while, everyone is walking on eggshells because the command structure has changed, and they're about 2 months away from making it back home, which is plenty of time for people's concerns to turn into full-blown conspiracies. But slowly, things get back to some sort of normal. But for Lu, the pressure of being in charge and taking that by force is starting to be too much. He starts getting paranoid. He thinks people are conspiring behind his back. He's sneaking around and creeping up on people, trying to spy and overhear what they're saying. Then he makes sure all the knives and weapons are taken and locked up. But it seems obvious to everyone that Lu is becoming unhinged. So then he makes this hit list. It includes the remaining members of the management team and 6 other members of the crew that he thought had been showing some type of resistance. And he organizes a plan to kill them all. He gets his team involved, and then one night he starts blasting this loud music from the bridge. And while the music is playing, they start chasing these guys down. They're stabbing them, they're beating them, and then they're just throwing them off the boat. Others are asleep and wake up with knives being jabbed into their body. It's a horror movie capped off with the sounds of screams, blasting music, and large objects hitting the water below. There was even one guy that just jumped off the boat into the water because he couldn't take it there anymore. Now Lu has sort of cleaned house, and there's blood everywhere. They've killed a total of 10 people, but that's not the end of it. Lu starts hearing whispers that the leader of the Mongolian gang was planning to overthrow him. So he decides to kill the leader of the gang and all of his members before they can do it to him. Now during this time, the captain has tried to join Lu's gang for safety. Because Lu and his group have killed so many people, the only way the captain would be protected is if he also got his hands dirty. So Lu tells him that if he kills the leader of the Mongolian gang, he'll let him live. So the captain, with the help of a younger crew member named Charlie, they lure the Mongolian gang leader onto the deck and stab him several times. But he still manages to escape. He jumps off the boat into the water all by himself. Then Lu called the rest of the Mongolian gang onto the deck, and some of them were forced to jump into the water, while others were stabbed to death before being tossed overboard. I really don't know which way was worse. Then Lu was done with his killing for the day, so he took all the knives and locked them back up. At this point, there were only 16 people left alive on this ship out of the original 33, but only 11 of them will return. So now they are a few days from making it back when the ship suddenly loses power and starts listing to one side. Lu jumps up, he's scrambling, and he orders his men to search the ship. There are only 15 people left aboard, and the main valve has been left open, so now the ship is taking on water. They managed to block where the water is coming in at, but there's already a ton of water on the ship, and the person that's missing is this one engineer from the management team that they had kept alive. Apparently, he'd opened the valves on the ship in an attempt to sink the boat and kill everyone on board. Then he jumped into the water himself. Lu and his men are trying to pump the water out, but it's not going fast enough. They only have one inflatable lifeboat, and the ship is sinking. So with no other choices, and after killing 17 people, they are forced to send out a distress signal. They collect as much food as they can carry, tie together anything that floats, and while they are doing that, a small group of 3 of them are lowering the last raft into the water. Then they're climbing down to start putting the supplies into the boat. But when the 3 men get to the raft, they just leave. And by the time Lu sees them, they are disappearing into the night. He plops onto the deck defeated and says, it's fine, it's fine. We'll just say that the men that left are the people that killed everybody else. But as fate would have it, the little lifeboat gets caught in the current, and it's being pulled right back. No matter how hard they paddle, no matter what they do, they are floating right back to the nightmare ship they just left. The crew remaining on the ship were incensed. They'd been on a murder rampage for the last few months, and now all that anger, all that venom was turned on the people that tried to desert them. They take knives, pipes, any weapons they can find, and start chucking them at this little life raft. The guys on the raft are getting hit in the head with pipes, knives stuck in their legs and their arms, and some of them are jumping off the raft into the water. One of the guys actually swims back to the boat and is begging for help. He's hurt, he's bleeding from his head, and Lou has his men pull him back on the boat and lay him down on the deck. Then he tells the only 2 men in the crew that haven't killed anybody to throw him back into the water so he could be eaten alive by the sharks. So they tie the man back up and toss him right back overboard. After all of that, a typhoon storms through, which was a blessing because it wipes most of the blood away. So now they are just floating dead in the water, waiting to be rescued or to die. And during this time, Lou has them start cleaning all the rooms, all the blood all over the interior of the ship, and they start to get their story straight. The plan was to blame everything on the Mongolian gang. They killed the management team, then tried to sink the boat, then escaped on the rafts, leaving the survivors for dead. They went over this story again and again, but shocker, no one believed them. The men were found on the water and brought back to China, where they would face trial, and all 11 were found guilty. Lou and 5 others were given the death penalty. Rest were given prison sentences of various lengths, and that is where this story ends. So the next time you have some calamari, think about the tragic tale of Sea Liner 2682. I'll see you guys next time.